All right, let's talk about how environment can change your perspective. So, to give you guys a little bit of understanding of what I mean by your environment changes your perspective. Um, Growing up in Philly, right? Anyone that's ever been to Philly, if you haven't been to Philly, it's, I mean, like any other inner city, take the fact that it's old as hell, and the fact that, I mean, it is what you see is what you get in Philly, right? So environment changes perspective. Like when you grow up in a concrete jungle, right, and all you know is pretty much gun store, liquor store, and rundown houses, right? You don't really start to think about what your future's like. I don't believe when I was in Philadelphia, when I was growing up in Philly, that I even thought about what my future would be like, or if I had a future, or what. I didn't think that far. I thought more about like the next day and getting past the next day, and not saying it was like just the PTSD, like, oh, who's going to get shot or this that. Just more or less just the fact of I'm thinking of what I'm going to do next with my life, as in the next two steps, like tomorrow, the next day, what we eating, what we're having, yada yada. When you grow up in that situation, I don't believe you look too far out of it. Now, that's not everybody. It's my unique perspective on it, how I looked at it while I was there. But when I moved out and they started showing me more of like that outside life, like that, suburban life, like when you start to see green grass, like you actually see that some of these people have yards. And then you start seeing that people have not just, a row home where you have this little backyard and this little front yard, but they got land, like we start looking at it nowadays, because nowadays you see BT or you see MTV, and like when y'all look at it, you see these big houses and everything else that these people have. And growing up, we didn't exactly have MTV to say like, yeah, you had it, but like it was kind of, even the raps and the songs and different R&B, it was just different. So and then at some point earlier on, you didn't have that at all. So now when you move to a transition where you start to see all of these things, or you move out into the suburb and you see these big ass houses that your friends live in and everybody, you start to think more so like, how do I get that? Because you can look at something like that and tell that's not an overnight thing, something that you're going to achieve in a day. You know what I mean? Yeah, of course, you get rich Ponzi scheme. We all think about them all the time. Like, how do I do that? How do I make that a thing? But I mean, let's be honest. Like, that's not something that you're just going to walk into and get. That's not something where you're going to say, oh, I'm going to get this house. So now you start thinking of, how do I connect the dots, right? Because when you were younger, like you idolized like the trap star, those guys that was making quick money, or always had money on them, because to you small time. All you know is that. So you see that money that everybody's getting, and you're like, yo, he driving in a nice car and he got this. But as you get older and you start to see, yeah, he driving in a nice car, but he's still in the same hood that I'm trying to get out of. He still drives that really nice car, but his whip costs more than his house. He hustling backwards to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless he's got plans to get somewhere else, right? Like, so like you start to see that, and like your thought process now becomes like, as you getting older, like, it's more to it. You know what I mean? Like, I'd love to have a nice car, but let me get that nice house first, right? And like your ideals start to change. So you start to get the best of both worlds. At least you try to. I feel like you got one or two thought processes, right? Like you go through a lot. So when I tell you that, you go from terrible schooling to actually having schooling that makes sense, you can take advantage of that or just be like, no, I don't care. It's up to you. But like, at the end of the day, now you have an opportunity. You want to take advantage of it or not? I mean, at the same time, you also in a whole different environment with a whole different set of networks, with a whole different set of people. It's like before, that excuse you had that was like, yeah, man, everything I try to do, the hood keeps bringing me back. They keep tearing me down. They can't let me go. Now you technically out. You gonna let it keep pulling you down? So you're not gonna move forward? Nah, your perspective going to change a little bit if you're smart. Like, you're going to be like, man, how do I conquer my environment? If you can make it out of that, you should be able to thrive in the next thing. Like, you get to coming out of the hood, anything after that in the suburbs, you should be able to thrive. You should be eating. You should be able to make, a dollar anywhere. Because if you can do it here, why can't you do it there? Right? So, like, that unique perspective tends to change who you are and what you see and how you start to evolve. And I look at that as a unique, I know if you've ever watched any of my other videos, you'll notice that I speak about the crutch and the ladder system. Like you either use it as a crutch or you use it as a ladder. That ladder, man, it can have a lot of rungs to it. Like if you get to a point where you already now understand both environments, you've seen both, you see how people act, use that accordingly and learn how to use that in the world to your advantage. Because if you can't, then what have you done with your life that's important besides waste time? Everybody has a unique set of challenges, but everybody is also given a unique set of challenges that can sharpen the tools that you already had to make you a better you that you can be in the future. If you don't know how to take advantage of those things, you know, growing up in the country, yeah, you might have just slung hay bales and that's all I did. I'm not saying that's what all they do in the country. I'm just saying you might have just slung hay bales and whatever not, but you have a unique skill that people like myself that come from the city do not know how to do. So how do you now use that to your advantage? Coming out of the city, you're a slick talker. You got the gifted gab. You know how to talk. You know how to get to people, have that conversation, articulate a little bit how you feel. You might be outspoken in certain. So how do you use that to your advantage, right? I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody. What have I done as great as the Mark Zuckerbergs and the rest of those in the world? Nothing. But how do I use mine to be successful for myself? And that's what I've learned how to do. So how do you learn how to do that? Whatever you have. Who knows? But coming out of the system, that unique perspective, environment does change perspective. So as you change from one environment to the next, could be one hood to the next hood, or could be from there to the suburbs to the city. Take everything you know and use it, because those perspectives that you're gonna start seeing from different points of view now, from people that lived in different ways, that's gonna come in handy as you go through the corporate world, as you go through, you know, life in general, because you're gonna meet all types of people. Hopefully that kind of explains a little bit. I'd like to go more in depth, but I'd like to break it down a little bit more. So we'll do a different video on that. But hopefully that kind of gives you an idea, at least, of how environment can kind of change perspective. How where you move from somewhere definitely can change who and what you realize on a whole different level. But until next time, this is Mac. You're watching Let's Talk TV. I'll see you then.